When Feng Wang declared the imposition of reciprocal tariffs globally, the global stock markets plummeted sharply. Nasdaq plunged 16% in 3 days, and the entire global stock market took a collective dive. Yet the US stock market collapse was only the prelude, starting with the US Great Depression and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which let the chill of the Depression sweep the world. Then came the Plaza Accord, plunging Japan into its lost 3 decades, and now Trump's Tariff 2.0 returns with even greater leverage. Yet every tariff war is merely superficial, with a hidden contest for technological supremacy, reshaping the industrial chain and even restructuring the global order as the ultimate game. So who will ultimately foot the bill for this great battle? Join me as I walk you through these 3 rounds of tariff wars that reshaped the global economic landscape. In 1928, the speculative frenzy in the US reached its peak. Investors were immersed in the explosive wealth surge brought by the bull market. In sheer joy, blinded by this illusory prosperity, leveraging as much as they could, fearing they might miss out on that once-in-a-lifetime turnaround. However, by 1929, the US stock market finally showed signs of a bubble nearing its peak. A silent catalyst that would shatter the American economy descended quietly. To cover up, Livermore hired over 100 financial operatives to split up their positions and short the market using 25 times leverage, shorting a market value that reached $450 million when the US GDP was only $103.6 billion that year. On October 29, 1929, the New York Stock Exchange thereby became the death knell of capitalism. The US stock market, once opened, plunged dramatically, falling 22% in a single day. From that day on, the US stock market completely collapsed. In the following month, the market tumbled another 48%. This crash obliterated the lifetime savings of the American people, vanishing overnight, leaving them with nothing to spend, leading to a complete economic collapse. Thus, the most catastrophic economic depression in US history erupted, and to save the American economy on the brink of collapse, 2 brilliant minds offered Hoover an idea to impose huge tariffs on all countries. In doing so, the prices of goods from other countries would skyrocket, rendering them uncompetitive at home, and unsold American products suddenly became popular. Thus, a grand display of determined resolve unfolded. US Congress, touting worker protection, in 1930 passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, named for 2 brilliant minds. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, imposing tariffs on over 20,000 imported products, with an average extra tariff of 40%. Pittsburgh's steel mill owners were initially overjoyed, expecting to oust German steel from the US market. US stocks then rebounded briefly, and even Livermore believed the crash was over, starting to buy at extremely low prices. But 3 months later, the America First policy directly triggered collective retaliation in global trade. France announced retaliatory tariffs of 127% on American automobiles. General Motors' European orders were immediately wiped out. Even worse, European countries collectively boycotted American wheat. In just 18 months, 25 countries around the world raised tariff barriers, and global trade volume plunged by 66%. US exports were directly halved. After a brief rebound, the US stock market reversed sharply, entering a prolonged slump that lasted 3 long years. With a cumulative drop of 89%, US steel fell from $262 in the market to $21, and General Motors dropped from $92 to $7. By 1933, the US GDP had been cut in half, and industrial output plummeted by 40%. The assembly lines in Detroit auto factories became overrun with rust, and even Ford Motor Company was forced to pay its workers partly in automobiles. The unemployment rate soared to 25%. Chicago's relief teams filled 3 entire blocks. What people call Hooverville refers to tent cities for the displaced. But the worst were the farmers. Wheat prices dropped from $1 per bushel to just 30 cents. Iowa dairy farmers had no choice but to dump all their milk in tears, since even transport fees couldn't be recovered. Banks collapsed one after another, like dominoes, and 9 million savings accounts vanished overnight. The most ironic part was the astute Reed Smoot, who spearheaded the Tariff Act, whose family business specialized in wool products. After the act passed, his factory enjoyed only a brief boom. But just a few months later, Canada raised tariffs on American cotton goods to an unprecedented 300%, ultimately causing his entire family business to collapse. This tariff war accelerated the global economic downturn, until a hot war was needed to wipe the slate clean and restart. After World War II ended, Japan, as a defeated nation, saw its economy plummet to rock bottom. Yet history's twists and turns are always unexpected. The US-Soviet Cold War quickly began, with mounting tensions on both sides. For strategic global planning, the US urgently needed to establish a secure, strategic foothold in Asia. Thus, a huge influx of dollar capital poured relentlessly into Japan, and Japan's economy began its rapid rise. By the 1970s, at the peak of the US-Soviet confrontation, the US suddenly realized its domestic manufacturing was nearly hollowed out by Japan. In 1977, for every 3 color TVs in American stores, one bore the Made in Japan mark. Under America's unilateral trade pressure, Japan was forced to sign the US-Japan Color TV Agreement, pledging to cut exports by 40% over 3 years. But Mitsubishi Heavy Industries quietly shifted its production lines over to Mexico. Performance-wise, they were so similar. Yet no matter how much the US suppressed them, affordable, high-quality Japanese goods outsold American ones. By 1985, Japanese semiconductors, with automotive and electronics outclassing the US auto industry, directly replaced US manufacturing, becoming the world's leader, capturing over 30% of the global market. It directly turned Detroit, America's Motor City, into the ghost town it eventually became. Half of America's trade deficit came from Japan. To suppress Japan, the US launched a Section 301 probe under fair trade pretenses, alleging that Japan was dumping and stealing technology, and on Japanese cars, imposing 1030 punitive tariffs on these products. Punitive tariffs. More critically, the US forced Japan to sign the Plaza Accord. The most crucial clause in the accord stipulated that the yen should fully reflect Japan's economic conditions. No wonder America is seen as a master strategist. Such linguistic finesse allowed them to pull it off. One sentence made the yen appreciate, attributing its rise to Japan's own economic development. Within just 6 months, the yen surged by 25%. This far exceeded the Plaza Accord's stipulated target. Meanwhile, Germany, also a signatory of the Plaza Accord, did not comply as strictly, always using macroeconomic measures to keep the German mark in a controlled state of appreciation. No wonder Japan is considered loyal, simply letting things be, allowing American capital to flood in and hype up to wildly inflate Japan's property and stock markets. During those lucrative days, the yen appreciated by 80% in 1 year. Japanese export competitiveness plummeted. Yet at the same time, Japanese assets soared. From 1955 to 1990, Japanese stocks surged 100-fold, and housing prices rose about 75-fold during the same period. Tokyo real estate cost about 800,000 RMB, and it was claimed that selling an entire Tokyo could buy the entire United States. Selling Japan could buy 4 times the US. Overreaching. It easily unravels. After Japan's 1990 bubble burst, it sank into 30 lost years. Meanwhile, US firms snapped up core Japanese assets like Panasonic at bargain prices. This trade war restored US tech supremacy. It also taught Japan a harsh lesson: to be fattened up for exploitation. As China rose, it gradually replaced Japan, becoming America's biggest trade deficit source. As early as Obama's era, the US grew wary of us. Back then, Obama intended to use the huge US-China deficit as justification to wage a trade war against us, mimicking Japan's collapse. He threatened to force us to deregulate and let the RMB appreciate, or else impose steep tariffs. We wouldn't loosen controls lightly, learning from past cautionary tales. However, just as the US primed to strike us, it backfired. Wall Street self-destructed. A sudden tape crisis crashed the US financial system and toppled its entire economy. Choosing the lesser evil, Obama had to ease his attack on us. For us, since joining the two, in a globalized world, isolation was not an option. We had to either join in retribution or grow stronger together. We resolutely chose the latter. So we teamed up with the US to launch a $4 trillion stimulus plan. We leveraged America's huge demand to boost manufacturing and infrastructure. Meanwhile, with our quality, affordable goods, the US soon emerged from recession. But inevitably, what was bound to happen, happened. Only 10 years passed after the fourth crisis. In 2017, the notorious Peking rose to power. Soon after, he launched a Section 301 probe against us. In 2018, citing trade imbalance against China, he initiated the largest trade war ever. He imposed a 25% tariff on $250 billion of Chinese goods. A 25% tariff was added. He also accused Huawei and ZTE of halting chip supplies. But China's counterattack hit the US hard. It retaliated with equivalent tariffs on US vehicles and aircraft, dealing a severe blow to Trump's base. At the same time, China countered with its rare earth trump card, restricting exports of other key materials. This directly choked US defense and the semiconductor supply chain. Global supply chains were forced to reshore. Then in 2020, the pandemic abruptly disrupted global supply and production chains, foreshadowing a global collapse of supply lines. It prefigured the breakdown of global logistics. China then accelerated domestic substitution in chips, with self-sufficiency climbing from 5% to over 10%. New energy vehicles and photovoltaics achieved full-chain self-reliance. In sectors where the US fell short, prices soared. The Fed was forced to hike rates frantically, with violent increases that drove global capital straight into the US, accelerating the virtual expansion of America's capital markets. A collapse became inevitable. In 2025, the Fang Wang policy returned once more, and US stocks plunged sharply. Nasdaq fell over 16% in 3 days. Within just 2 months of Trump's tenure, it had already dropped 22%. I care not if I live, I only wish for your demise, dragged down global markets. German and Japanese stocks dropped 12% in 3 days, and UK stocks fell over 10%. A shares rebounded 7% after the holiday. Why did this tariff stand cause such global market chaos? It's the uncertainty of the Fang Wang policy and its massive tariffs. It leaves major companies in a bind. After all, America remains the world's largest buyer. Must they continue doing US business? To do so, they must rebuild factories in America. Then Trump suddenly blurted out, "We will make America glorious again." But with its dollar power, America devised new financial policies, their fallout being capitalists earning easy money. Who would work when profits come effortlessly? Now they're forced to screw bolts on shop floors with little efficiency. If they build US factories, with today's workforce and infrastructure, when will they be completed? And can they even hire enough labor? Extra construction, labor, and supply costs are highly unpredictable in America. So, how can they build Without huge tariffs, they'll lose the world's largest market. More importantly, it's a collective gamble. Reshoring U.S. manufacturing forces other nations to lose theirs unacceptable. Thus, regardless of the BK's threats, tariffs are inevitable. If they're set to act, then damn it, do it. Amid century-long upheaval, trade war is merely the prelude. A dispute over trade imbalances that masks U.S. monetary and tech hegemony, and a fight for global dominance. When hegemonic powers refuse to yield, a new order is forged in conflict. This time, history may no longer be written by America. I care little for my own fate. I only want you to perish. A fight for global hegemony persists. When powers refuse to retreat, a new order is inevitably born from clash. And this time, history may no longer be scripted by America.